First Sergeant with the 1132nd Military Police Company.
4 years of active duty with the United States Marine Corps. In '07, I joined the North Carolina National Guard.
Served in Operation Iraqi Freedom 3 with the 2nd of the 278 Armored Cavalry Regiment.
Went through OCS and got my commission.
What they called a hunter-killer team.
We worked firsthand with the Iraqi police.
Deployed with the 30th Brigade as a platoon leader in Alpha Company, 1st of the 120.
We would lay support fire.
Mission was PTT, which is Police Transition Team, patrolling every day, 7 days a week, in and around the streets of Baghdad.
I woke up, couldn't hear nothing. I know I was strapped down to a backboard, C-collar. I could feel the prop wash off the blades of the Black Hawk. I sustained some shrapnel wounds in my buttocks. My vest worked and it stopped the bulk of it hitting my back. Glass blew out 2 discs in my back. Hearing loss, PTSD from all that. We were ambushed. Small arms, RPG fire.
Within 48 hours of arrival, we started taking indirect fire, mortars and rockets right away.
Our little firefight lasted probably about 2.5, 3 hours.
Convoy hit a IED and 4 soldiers were killed in the lead truck in front of me.
My Humvee was hit. I was in the gun turret at the time with my back to it.
We suffered 5 killed in action and 41 wounded in action. And for a company-sized element, that gained a lot of attention. And whenever they reviewed this, they found that no other company has suffered that amount of casualties since World War II.
I saw in my soldiers' faces and in their reaction to what happened that these were, some of them 10, 20-year people that they had known. They knew their families. They knew their kids and their wives knew each other. So there was more of an emotional or personal impact upon them that I guess was transferred to me that I didn't have. I didn't know them that well, but I could see by the reaction in my soldiers. And then that caused me, I guess, more personal, emotional response.
I know when I came back, a lot of my people have, in fact, some of them currently are still on the patient list of inpatient and outpatient treatment for physical and emotional support. And I noticed any sudden noise because of so many indirect fires that we took. I found myself almost wanting to hit the floor. Kind of had some basic being startled if the thunder is just right or any kind of sudden noise, but and that's about it. And I'm not to the point of being paranoid, but any kind of thing of any sudden noise kind of makes me think back to these indirect fires that have taken our fellow soldiers.
So one of the most important things I think I'd like to convey is that one can recover from PTSD. And I think that's important to say because I think historically many people have given the message that PTSD is a lifelong condition that you never really get over. But actually there are some effective treatments available. It is important to say though that recovery is not the same thing as cure. There's no pill or therapy that's going to erase a bad thing that may have happened in one's life or prevent bad things from happening in the future. And we all have had bad events in our lives, for example, the loss of a loved one, and if something triggers a memory of that, you're still going to remember it and to some degree have some sadness and some feelings towards that. But one can change how they respond to past events, past traumas. Medication can in fact be helpful, can help reduce some of the symptoms and help improve sleep and in some cases nightmares. But typically medicine's not going to be enough. One way to think about this is imagine you were taking an antidepressant for depression. It's maybe secondary to a loss of a job, but you didn't engage in certain behaviors like going out, creating a resume, filling out applications, searching for a job. To some degree, you're probably still going to feel depressed, right? But the medicine may be helpful in helping you get a little more activated and reduce some of the symptoms. In other words, more tolerable to engage in some of those behaviors. And I think the case is the same with PTSD. You know, taking some medicine may help you tolerate going out to the store a little bit more, for example. And so in that sense can be useful. PTSD can develop in anybody given the right conditions. Developing PTSD does not mean that one is particularly weak or their coping resources are weaker than the next guy's. Given the right set of events, PTSD can develop to any of us, no matter how much we're used to being exposed to stressful events.
I know at first it was a lot of hypervigilance. Lost my feeling of self-worth. You know, why did I survive when the others before me and after me has died? Nightmares, night sweats. When thunderstorms come on, I can't sleep. Helicopters fly over the house, riles me up a bit. But my main thing is survivor's guilt.
Looking at the clinical definition of PTSD, one of them is not avoiding situations where it doesn't remind you of what had happened because of the emotional response that may come. And of that, I do. I prefer. We watch TV, a lot of documentaries on Iraq, videos that viral videos where it shows a car bomb or an IED going off of just somebody got a video of it. I prefer not to see that. As far as I'm concerned, I've seen one too many of those.
I got in my dress uniform to go to his funeral and couldn't walk out the door because, how could I go face a man I respected whose son didn't come home from something I survived?
Even outside of an incident where someone may deploy and there's not that one traumatic incident, over time with the stress of having to go out, going into known areas where they may get hit, they may encounter an IED or enemy fire or whatnot, that stress too builds up over time. And while they don't have that one day or that 1 minute of their life that is imprinted and become an issue that they'll have to deal with their life, they do have the whole deployment where that compounding of stress can over time become that one incident, except that now it's a 9 or 10 month incident that they'll have to deal with, reintegrating back into society.
There are many people who go into combat situations, theater situations, where they are not in any direct kind of a firefight. For a lot of service members coming back, they may not feel that they have actually been deployed or are actually worthy of calling themselves a combat veteran. When in fact the development of some trauma disorders, PTSD, can actually be caused by enduring chronic levels of stress, worrying about what may happen. I think it's important to note that there is no safe space in country. Whether you're outside of the wire or inside of the wire, mortar attacks can happen anywhere. And the vicarious traumatization, if you will, of having to endure the potential of an attack can very frequently cause damage. An interesting thing about the reintegration process is that when people return home, our service members return home, there is a thought that they are home from the stress of deployment. The constraints of theater and the structure of theater is quite the opposite from the chaos of returning home.
I think one thing that's important for folks as they try to reintegrate back into their daily lives, into society, and into their families, is to make sure that they really engage their support systems and that they try to maintain regular sleep-wake cycles as best they can. It may be hard to do. You know, some people struggle with nightmares, and I want you to know that the evidence-based treatments we have can also target that, so and pretty effectively so. There's also a lot of resources out there for families and even for kids. It's my understanding that the VA even has a Sesame Street DVD for kids. So we also have to recognize that PTSD doesn't just impact the individual who suffered the trauma, but also their families, and that there is help available for them too.
As I mentioned, we suffered a high amount of killed in action and wounded in action, and whenever we do patient tracking to kind of check up on our fellow soldiers, I've had several that, as I mentioned, currently still receiving treatment and going through rehabilitation, both physical and emotional, and unfortunately we also had a suicide. He was actually on the way to the VA to get some assistance, and he just pulled over and shot himself. And the suicide rate is getting more attention as well in the military, because the statistics of that is really high.
The suicide rates for law enforcement historically are higher than that for our civilian population when you adjust it for age and gender. The suicide rates for the military currently exceed those of law enforcement. So what you have is a heightened potential for psychopathology and suicide in those returning service members who happen to be civilian police officers. There is no problem with asking somebody how they're doing, taking a daily check on what's going on in your life. That is how you're going to be on top of your force and making sure that your force is a healthy force.
Well, a lot of people are hesitant to go and ask for help because of the stigma that's or label that's involved with it. Now, I do know that any kind of military or VA-related assessment centers, all that's confidential. That a lot of times there's not even a record. And you need to go speak with someone. But they have leaning and asking for help is more a sign of courage instead of not. So there is a label to a point, but it's not as strong as what it used to be.
As a deputy sheriff or as any law enforcement officer in North Carolina, if you have any types of issues, I thought that they could take your badge from you, take your certification, your career would be over with. So I was very standoffish at first.
And there's an awful lot of medical professionals out there that will keep this in a confidential manner, so it will not affect your profession or your status in the departments. So we strongly encourage people who feel like they need some assistance, please lean out. You got your chaplain corps, and in some departments you have your mental health assessment centers that is confidential. So I encourage you to, if you see anyone that your coworker, you need some help, then be a friend, offer that assistance, and don't do the labeling procedure. And it's gotten better than what it used to be.
I'd build up this false view of the mental health system, and I had nothing to sustain these views, and that's what I think the VA really helped me see. And once they broke down that wall, I started to deal with some of my issues.
I think it's very common for police to have a false view of the mental health system. Most of their careers are spent with the mentally ill population, Baker acting somebody, or putting restraining orders on somebody, or escorting somebody for an evaluation. And I think at the point where our civilian police officers who happen to also be veterans need assistance through the mental health system, they're going to be a little bit more wary about that because they've been involved with the mental health system on the other side. It's important to understand for that very special population of people that the mental health system has made significant changes very directed toward the population of returning veterans and law enforcement officers.
You know, treatment is confidential, that's important to know. And relative to other types of treatments out there that, you know, people hear about psychotherapies and it conjures up all kinds of images for people. But the treatment for PTSD, the evidence-based treatments, are short-term relative to other treatments. So it's not a 2 to 3 year kind of deal necessarily. Some people may be worried about that.
When our veterans return home, it is a very sweet time. It is a time for re-engagement with their families and with their civilian employers. And with the reintegration period, there is an adjustment that has to occur. This adjustment doesn't occur overnight, and it takes sometimes up to 6 or 8 months really to be back from theater and to be back really feeling like you're functioning where you need to be in your civilian job. I think it's important to understand that reintegration doesn't happen overnight and that bumps with family and bumps with colleagues and co-workers is actually part of the reintegration process. It doesn't mean that somebody is pathologic or that somebody is not going to recover from the deployment. It is a healthful return to full functioning.
Now, some of the indicators that probably be important for you as a co-worker to assist one another is you can, normally National Guard and reservists, you serve with these people before they were deployed and you kind of know their demeanor, and then when they come home and they get readjusted and transition back to civilian life, you kind of know, you got a baseline on what you're looking for. So if you happen to see a character change or excessive absence from work, or the use of force is picked up where normally that never happened, or some of the domestic related issues either with their spouse or their friends or their family, if there's any obvious increase in that, that's a warning sign to kind of intervene and step in and do some early warning detections and assist.
If they're isolating themselves from their friends, if they're not engaging in the regular activities that they used to take pleasure in with their colleagues and their cohorts, I think that's something really to be aware of. Isolating behavior is very common for somebody who is suffering very negative effects of reintegration and wanting to be by themselves and maybe are very depressed.
Also, some people turn to substance abuse of some kind. And in the short term, those are effective to a degree, meaning that they reduce the distress that's involved with these symptoms. But the problem is, over the long haul, it actually maintains the particular problem. So to get over PTSD, one has to reduce their avoidance behavior in various ways. Of course, some types of avoidance behavior are more toxic than others. I mentioned substance abuse already. And we can end up developing an additional problem in the process.
On the law enforcement side, if you have somebody who is depressed or feeling anxious or suffering some effects from PTSD, you are also going to see higher risk-taking behaviors generally in this population. If they're refusing to wear their vest to work, if they are making entry without waiting for backup, these are very clear signs, almost parasuicidal signs, if you will, that they are taking risks that can be very dangerous. If you run into a colleague, a police officer, a friend of yours who is engaging in these higher risk type behaviors, and maybe they are experiencing higher excessive use behaviors as well, there is no harm, and I think we are dutifully bound to check in with them and see how they're doing. These men and women have served our country and have served our country honorably, and I believe that we need to be tasked with making sure that we're taking care of them upon their return.
That's where we as law enforcement need to back each other up. We need to take this person in before it gets so big where it's a major incident, disciplinary action, termination, lawsuits, or whatever. We back each other up on calls every day, we need to back each other up on stuff like PTSD as well. If we police our own, there should be no issue with this.
I think it's also important to note that PTSD can have downstream effects or relate to other problems such as relationship difficulties, marital difficulties, employment difficulties, and so on and so forth. And that just treating the PTSD may not treat those particular difficulties that have occurred. However, treating the PTSD will at least remove that continued downstream effect that's secondary to the PTSD.
Service members who are returning from deployment, very few of them, in their reintegration phase, 12, 14 months back, are not going to come to you and say, I feel depressed and I think my brain injury is causing me to have relationship issues with my wife. How it will present is in some level of a relationship issue, a separation, a divorce, followed very closely by some level of financial difficulties, economic environment, homelessness, and finally followed by substance abuse, whether it's alcohol or prescription drugs. Very rarely it's going to be an illicit drug. These factors set up service members for suicide. Very rarely do they come to you telling you that they are suicidal. They will come to you with all of their other problems laid out.
So I want to emphasize how important it is for folks who may have some of these symptoms or have already been diagnosed with PTSD to reach out for help. It's important because of the downstream effects I mentioned, the impact on their quality of life, their functioning, their employment, their marriage, their relationships, and so forth. And because it's very unlikely to just go away on its own, particularly as there's continued avoidance behavior, which is very natural and logical, and we're all sort of wired to be avoiders to some degree, so it's understandable that we would do that. But the condition will likely continue to be maintained and grow without intervention.
The North Carolina National Guard Integrated Behavioral Health System not only serves as an immediate assessment for crisis intervention, but we also are a portal to all of the other internal and external resources that service members have available to them that they may not be aware of. These can be financial resources, employment resources, housing resources, child care, elder care, all of the different facets in life that can end up in a behavioral health crisis if not taken care of immediately.
Right. Whenever you do have a situation where you come up on what you believe is a veteran, which he may have the 1,000-yard stare, if you will, or the shakes, or the very, very timid or aggressive. The big thing, like I say, officer safety is always going to be first, but most of the time, just kind of relax, give him his space, talk to him, ask him, is he a returning veteran, thank him for his service, and has he got a caseworker that maybe you can make contact with to further assist him in whatever he has to do?
Try to develop a relationship very quickly, not get into details with the person, but to let them know that, from where I've come from. So I'm not just this outsider that doesn't understand.
Just take your time. Just like any other person in a special population, you just have to be patient. You also have to consider your safety.
If I can make a connection between myself and that individual, that even on the level of that we're on the same team, that we're on the same side, that will allow me to maybe get into a situation of trust between he or she and I.
Just kind of give them the space, and normally, the veteran will get back on focus, and he'll do the right thing on most occasions.
Maintain a relationship with that more of their rational side of their thinking, and not allow that fear to overcome that and to cause them to do something irrational.
Don't yell at these folks. I mean, I ain't saying treat them with kid gloves, but show them some respect. I mean, Here's a man, man or woman, who has probably seen more than 10 minutes outside the wire in Iraq or Afghanistan than some of your average officers will see in a career. You know, so treat them with a little bit of dignity and respect. And I think you'll start seeing that come back. If there's a charge, you know, charge them. If there's a mental health issue, direct them in that way. But just treat them with some dignity and respect that they deserve.
Know your local resources that are out there for the mental health and the assessment centers that are out there that's in your local area. They will give you some good advice as well to how to deal with them on either a domestic related issue or a collision issue. Or, a lot of our returning veterans or the DWI rate gets high, and domestic related calls are high, especially a short time after they return. So there's a lot of people out there to help you. Obviously officer safety is first and you have to do your duty, but just try to see what assessment centers are out there that's near you to further assist these returning veterans.
There are a variety of evidence-based treatments out there for PTSD, and by evidence-based I mean it's treatment that actually has some good scientific support. And I am aware that the VA, since about 2007 or so, has done a really good job of rolling out these treatments and making them available. As I understand it, they've consulted experts in the field in those particular treatments to provide extensive training and supervision of clinicians in the VA system.
The North Carolina National Guard stood up our integrated behavioral health system in November of 2010. And that system was stood up specifically to be able to catch and to close the service members that were falling through inherent gaps in the behavioral health system. So with the integrated behavioral health system in the North Carolina National Guard, a service member or their family member can call our Joint Force Headquarters 800 number 24/7, 365 and be in contact immediately with a licensed North Carolina National Guard clinician. Our response time is about 3 minutes at the moment. The reason this was set up is because with police officers and with service members and with younger people, you have a window of opportunity. If they are asking for help, you have a window of opportunity to make sure that you get them the help that they're requesting, because they're probably not going to give you a second chance.
Oh, there most definitely is hope. Young man, young woman coming back that may not have family. That's where I feel we as law enforcement can step up and be that friend. I was like, I know we combat drugs, you know, thugs all day long, but you know, most of us got into this job to help somebody. Well, step up, help somebody.
I have to commend the support services that are now in place for the VA and other agencies that are really supportive. But it's an ongoing thing, and it will be for some time for the returning soldiers.
What I'd like to say to our men and women in uniform is there's absolutely no shame whatsoever in seeking help here. And there's nothing spooky about the treatment. I don't know what sorts of things we may have heard, but it doesn't involve laying on the couch or talking about your childhood or any pseudoscientific methods. It's pretty straightforward, understandable as to what's occurring, kinds of treatment, and it works extremely well.
You know, I'm very lucky, not only to have survived a war, but I'm very lucky and blessed. Will I still have bad days in the future? Most definitely. Will I have these memories that last me to the day I die? Most definitely. But with everything I've found in my 7-year journey, I can make it. I can make it. I feel I can. We in law enforcement guard the home fires. So when these boys get home, let's show them the respect and the dignity that that they deserve. And if they need help, let's get them help. You know, don't let a day go by that you know that you can do what you can do today because somebody like that. You know, I thank the good Lord above every day for everything I have. My life, number one, getting my second chance in life, and everything I got. Wife, kids, my twins. Just don't forget where you come from. Let's take care of one another.